my spirit captured in the little white box. Michael Lissack is a regular guest in this class, and I'm really grateful that he's here to come up, and because I've known Michael a long time. And there are three things that Michael, I think, will bring to this class, and I hope you will find them useful. One of them is his own story. He was the youngest, or second youngest partner ever at Smith Barney, and was living the life that some in this room anyway really aspire to. The $1 million salary, the status, the future. And he'll tell you what happened and where that went and why, at least as he can understand it, and how he ended up down in Naples, Florida, by way of Rotterdam and a few other places. So there is that story, and that personal story. He'll share that with you. The second thing that Michael will bring to you is a very realistic, at least from his perspective, and perhaps somewhat disturbing view of the street and the way that business works. And it is, at least it is, for some of you in this room, it is where you will be working. For most of you in this room, it will be a part of what you do. And so you can ask Michael any questions you want. He is very willing to share his opinion with you. I have yet to see him ask a question that he wasn't willing to answer. The people who get the answer are not happy with the answer, but he will give it to you as best he can. The third thing that Michael brings is that since the events that changed his life, or that he decided would change his life, happened, he has spent a good deal of time reflecting upon them fairly systematically. He took a PhD in business and has written about business ethics, and has written about what he has done in a way that gives him that foundation as well. So he brings that to this, and he teaches business ethics. He also teaches business ethics in a very different way than I do. He is a lot more in your face. I'm a nice guy. Michael is very smart, but he's not a nice person, and so he will take you on. So that's enough, I think, from me. Michael, they're yours.
Okay, so how many of you have worked on Wall Street? How many of you will be trying to go back to Wall Street or go to Wall Street? Those of you that have had Wall Street exposure, how many think that Wall Street is an ethical place? Ooh, nobody. All right. So let me give you a little bit of context here. I went to Smith Barney straight out of business school, and I got out of business school when I was 20. So I was a kid. All right. It so happened that I had a very weird aptitude for doing bond pricing. And this is back in the days before there were computers, and I was able to actually do bond pricing a lot faster than bond calculators, and with about the same accuracy. So I had a very weird aptitude for this. The net result of this was that by age 26, I made partner. And I was basically running the quant side of the public finance department at Smith Barney. And when the story unfolds, my actual job description, if you were to look on the org chart, I had a very weird job. I was in charge of incremental revenue. Anyone want to guess as to what that means? Karen, anything? Yes. All right, so whenever we got a client in the house, or if we had a deal in the house, it was my job to figure out how we got more money out of the client or could make more money out of the deal. Right? So I didn't have to go out and get the clients. I just had to figure out how to milk them for all they were worth. Right? And I was very good at this job. Right? My group in the department, for the 5 or 6 years that the scheme I'm going to tell you about was going on, generated somewhere around 150% of the department's profits, which meant everyone in the department's bonuses were dependent on what I was doing. And one year, 1991, I generated 110% of the firm's profits. All right, so the entire firm was dependent on what my group was doing. Now, I need to put some context, so I need some willing or unwilling volunteers who are going to find their names dragged through the mud on this. Because we have to give you an example of what was going on. So, Karen, I've already picked on you, and you're now going to be the good person in this. And so, you work for Vanderbilt. All right? You've got an important job at Vanderbilt, and Bart is your supervisor. And Bart happens to come visit you one day at your house, and he notices that you're sitting doing computer work in a really rotten kitchen chair. He goes, Karen, you've never heard of ergonomics and carpal tunnel syndrome, and I can get sued. The university can get sued. This is just intolerable. You need another chair to do this computer work. And since it's going to be in your house, here's the deal. You go out and get a chair, and the university will reimburse you for anything that you spend over $100. Now, don't overdo it. But get yourself a chair that ergonomically is right. So you take Jennifer and Robert chair shopping with you. And you guys go out to buy a chair. And you find a really great chair, maybe one of these things, maybe something else, whatever ergonomically was great. And Robert's the first one that says, this is a great chair. I wasn't even thinking of getting a chair, but it's a really great chair. I'm going to get one. How much is it? And JD, you own the chair store. All right, and you go, hey, Robert, it's $100. What do you say? He goes, great, no problem. It's a good chair, $100. Fine. Jennifer gets in on the act. She's sitting in the chair. She says, this is great. So Jennifer says, I'll take one too. And JD, how much? And, same $100? JD goes, no. I've been having eyes on you in class, etc. For you, it's $90. All right? Does anyone see a problem so far? Are we ethically okay? Anyone see an ethical issue? Jennifer, you're $10 ahead, just because he's making eyes at you. Well, is that an ethical issue?
I think so, yeah.
All right, so Jennifer said that price discrimination might be an ethical issue. All right, so now Karen wants the chair. And Karen goes, JD, I want the chair too. How much?
$300.
And why 300?
Because Vanderbilt's going to pay everything above $100.
All right, so Karen, what do you say?
I don't think that's fair.
You don't think that's fair? Why do you care? You're only going to have to pay $100.
I know, but it's still not fair to Republican University.
Okay, so she says no, JD, she can't do this. So JD, what's your response to this? Oh, what's your name?
Bradford.
Okay, Brad, what is your advice to JD? What do you suggest he do?
He can give her $50 of the $200 that Vanderbilt's paying.
Well, why don't we do better? All right, so JD's new offer to you, Karen, is it's $400, and I'm going to give you $75.
No, it's still not right.
Well, now the chair's only going to cost you $25, right? You were going to pay $100, but he's kicking you back $75.
Yeah, but it's still not fair because you're ripping off the school.
You're ripping off the school. Is it theft?
Yeah. In a way it is, yeah. Because if he's charging $400, I know if he's willing to sell to Jennifer for $90, I can probably go to another chair store and buy a chair. I'd find somewhere where I can buy it for that.
But why do you care? Now it's only going to cost you $25. If you go to the chair store, you're going to have to pay $90 or $100, and he's going to give it to you for net $25.
But it's still not ethically correct.
Still not ethically correct. Okay. JD, do you see an ethical problem with doing this?
Absolutely.
But you're going to do it anyway.
Well, I was kind of trying to help out the conversation,
Okay, all right. Now, would it make you feel any better, Karen, if he was willing to give you a certificate that you could give the school that said that he sold it to you at a fair market price?
No, because I'm lying.
Why is that lying?
Because I know Jennifer's getting it for less, and I know it's going to work.
Oh, you've never been to a store where it's overcharged?
If I was going to do that, I'd go buy a $400 chair that's 10 times better and pay the $400 to get a better chair.
But that would cost you $300 out of your pocket.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be lying or cheating that way.
I see. Jennifer, do you get any comfort from that letter that says it's a fair market price?
On my $90 chair?
No, on her $300 share. No, no. So you wouldn't take the letter. Robert? All right, now, what's your name?
Jeremy.
Okay, so Jeremy's gonna write a letter to help JD out, and he's got another chair store. And Eben's gonna write another one, because he's got another chair store. So now JD can present letters from his competitors that say that this $300 price is the fair market price. You feeling any better yet?
I know it's not.
You know it's not. But are you willing to turn it in and get the money? Kickback doesn't interest you. Is there anyone who would take the kickback and turn in the letters?
We're talking about $75.
Okay, fine. Let's change the math.
No, I still wouldn't.
All right, now let's make it what it was, which was U.S. government bonds. And let's change the math. And instead of a $300 chair, let's make it a $300 million chair. And the kickback might be, I don't know, a couple $1 million in the Swiss bank account?
Nope, lose my job, go to jail.
How do you know?
I could.
All right.
Possibility.
It's a possibility. Okay, so how many would do it for a couple $1 million?
Is it illegal?
Decide.
Well, the school or whoever finds out that you did it, it's not, I wouldn't say it's illegal. If anyone finds out that that's what happened, you would get in trouble.
Remember what you said last time, you always get caught.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is though, this like written law that you can't do this. That's all I'm saying. And if it's not a written law, yeah, let's do it. Yes.
Okay, so we've got one person who's willing to do it.
Oh.
All right, are you guys aware of the difference? I don't know.
You guys are lying to yourself.
Has Bart ever talked to you about the difference between Roman law and common law? Are any of you aware of this? All right, we live in a common law society. So here and in most Anglo-Saxon societies that have common law, the rule is if it's not expressly forbidden, so we're now coming to what Jeremy said, then it's allowed. So he's saying, where's the rule that says you can't? Now, most of Europe actually functions under Roman law. And Roman law is the exact opposite. If it is not expressly allowed, it's forbidden. All right, so you just have to be aware there are two standards there. But meanwhile, Jeremy said there's no written, show me the written rule that says I can't do this.
It's a big problem. I'm going to be working in Europe, so I think might as well. No, I'm not.
We're going to leave you in the U.S. for the moment. All right, so, but if there is no written rule, you don't see a problem. Karen's just saying that it's bothering her.
Maybe it's unethical.
And why is it unethical?
Because it's not right. You're screwing over the school or someone in order to benefit yourself.
Well, what if you don't take the kickback?
But I still buy the chair for $300 even though I know Jennifer's buying it for $90.
Right.
It's still not right.
And now what's wrong?
That would just make me mad because I'm getting a bad deal, and I wouldn't want to deal with someone who would sell me a chair for more than it's worth, and it's obviously not worth $90.
Well, what if he started taking you to fancy dinners and giving you flowers?
I do.
Hey, you want to give me a chair for $90?
No, you're not getting a chair for $90 because JD, why did you say $300 in the first place?
Because Vanderbilt's gonna pay for everything above 100.
Right. So he might as well make the $200 from Vanderbilt, and he could spend $100 on her for dinner and flowers. Still come out $100 ahead for his own pocket.
I mean, that stuff goes on every day in business. I mean, to a certain extent, just with expense reports and
Exactly.
everything, it does go. I mean,
So are you saying everybody's a thief?
no, I'm not saying it's cheap. I'm saying I think there's different varying degrees, and I think this one is one that I will not be comfortable with. It's also, you're going to go stay in a hotel and your company's paying for it. Yes, I will probably stay at the W over Motel 6.
And why is that any different?
I guess it, I don't know, I guess it depends.
Wait a minute. The Motel 6, so everything, you're going to stay at a hotel and the company's going to pay for it. And you only need to sleep. So you're willing, if you were
I'll
paid...
sleep better at the W, and I'll be more energized and more efficient.
I believe this is known as a justification. So let's go back to the world of bonds, because now you sound just like what we sounded like, all right? So when we were doing this, we would overcharge whenever the federal government was going to pay, And our justification was we come up with all this nonsense about risk and how we were doing this and we were doing that. And, you know, we could justify it. And in fact, for the first couple of years that we were doing it, the way I justified it in my own head was I said, look, we're the Hummer dealer. There's a lot of people out there that sell used Beetles. But we're the Hummer dealer, and Hummers are expensive. And if you want to come to us to get this product, you pay our price. Now, I live in Naples, Florida. If you buy a Hummer in Naples, Florida, you pay 5 to 10 grand above MSRP. And it's the biggest Hummer market in the country. So it's not like the guy doesn't have Hummers. He's got 200 of them on the lot. All right? But you pay above MSRP. And you know when you walk in the door, he's expensive. And we've got a Lexus dealer who charges above MSRP, and you go, but I can drive to Fort Myers 30 miles away and save money. And he says, go. I don't care, go. And he sells all his cars above MSRP. All right, so my justification, the one you used for the W, was, you know I'm buying the Rolls Royce. I'm buying the expensive thing. Now, what was your name in the green?
Bradford?
Okay, so Bradford, if I'm doing the Hummer approach to life, what would undercut the Hummer approach? What could I not have going on if I want to keep that up as my justification?
Well, I don't understand. What do you mean? What?
Well, if I started selling Hummers at Beetle prices to you, but I sold Hummers at above MSRP to JD, why have a problem?
Because it's the identical product, and you're just charging two different prices.
Yeah.
Is it your job to assume that the buyer is knowledgeable? I mean, and do you care? I mean,
No,
isn't it the buyer's job to understand the product in which they're purchasing?
So now we'll get the question of information and how much of this is the buyer's responsibility. So somebody raised price discrimination once, and now you're into the buyer's knowledge. All right, but I'm going to come back now to those letters. You know, Jeremy wrote one, Evan wrote one, etc. Would it bother you if you were writing letters, and the letters said you were doing this at a fair market price, and you weren't changing the price just because JD was the customer?
Am I getting business from JD on the flip side? And he's writing me letters too?
Of course.
What do you say?
Oh.
You know, your class is with it, Mark.
This is the advanced class.
We were doing this, all right? In 1989, before this all started, when state and local governments would buy U.S. treasuries, they bought them mostly directly from treasuries. And 95% of them were bought directly from Uncle Sam. By 1992, when we were in the thick of this, all right, 95% of them were being bought from Wall Street firms. And only 5% directly from Uncle Sam. So the lawyers who had to give opinions on all this stuff started getting suspicious. And the first thing they did is they started with that letter I asked JD to write. It's a fair market price, and I certify, and I didn't raise the price just because I was selling it to a municipality. And that didn't seem to, they could get those letters easily. So then they said, well, you've got to get your competitors, which Jeremy were you, and you came in writing letters saying, yes, I looked at JD's deal, it was a fair market price. Now, anyone want to guess how I got those letters out of First Boston and Morgan Stanley, et cetera?
Paid them all.
No offer to write letters.
What's your name? Okay, so Kristen's got it. What you did would be that's too suspicious and leaves a nasty paper trail. No, there were a couple of us that ran this market. We opened an aftermarket in letters. And I would keep track of it on a 3x5 card in my desk. And my counterpart at Goldman that also did this kept track of it on a 3x5 card, so maybe he had 5x7 on his desk. And we were the clearinghouse for letters. If you needed a letter, even if we weren't involved, you called one of us and we'd say, well, it looks like Prue owes Morgan Stanley a letter, so why don't you call the guy over at Prue and tell him that I said he owed you a letter. And you get a letter, because it's the you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Karen's having a real problem with this stuff, right?
It's just not right.
It's just not right. So, but you don't know that it's theft.
It is to a certain degree, yeah.
When it was $75, was it theft?
Yes.
All right, but now that it's $1 billion, you're not sure.
No, it is,
How's that any different though than having an IPO where you're the lead and you have a bunch of other firms, tagging on and aren't doing any work and they're just collecting fees, and then the next time that they do an IPO, they're the lead and they put you as a co. How's that
Well, which part are you saying is not different? Does you scratch my back, I scratch your back for the letters, or for the overpricing on the securities?
Well, I'm not just saying the overpricing of the securities, like, to be like a co on an IPO, we're not doing very much work.
Well, I will point out to you, to be a co in an IPO in the old days, up to 2 years ago, one of the reasons you wanted to be a co in an IPO was that you got to buy underpriced securities that you could distribute to your clients and make a
I
profit.
mean, you're making a ton of money for almost zero, like almost zero work.
And remember, I was in the municipal bond world. This wasn't IPOs and this wasn't stocks, but we actually had people who were still co-managers. And there was an infamous case in Louisiana where somebody who didn't even have a broker-dealer's license was paid $500,000 by First Boston to be a co-manager on a deal. And you might ask, well, what did they do? And the answer is they were the governor's friend. This governor ended up going to jail, but that's a different issue. That seems common in the United States nowadays. All right, so we're back to bonds, and I'm justifying with the W. Karen says it's okay as long as I use the W approach to justify it. Which is great, because the people I worked for thought that was good too. I mean, you do well. I was making a 7-figure income.
But the difference there is the W's not sitting there charging different, like
Oh,
you
really?
Yeah, they are.
Oh, really? I got news for you. If you walked into that same W and you said, I'm a stranded airline passenger, and the airline said that you put me up overnight. Do you know what the airline pays for that same room that you just paid $300 for?
a lot more.
No,
A lot less.
$49. They paid $50 for her $300 room. All right, why? Because they're going to give the W repeat business to fill otherwise empty rooms, and a room is a wasting asset. If you don't put someone in it overnight, you can't get it the next night. You can't go back and charge for the prior night.
Right.
All right, so they prefer to get the $50 than get nothing. All right, if you walk in and say it's the military rate, same thing, you'll get a cheaper rate. All right, so it's the same room.
Right. I got you.
All right, but how do they justify charging her the $300? You said you slept better, right? And I forget, does the W have the heavenly bed? I mean, that's one of the chains.
It's the Westin.
That's a
Yeah.
waste.
All right. All right, you're going to sleep better, etc. So I'm doing this stuff, we're making a fortune. And my justification is the Hummer Rolls-Royce W, Karen's justification. And all of a sudden, we go to do a $1 billion deal for the city of New York. And we go to do the deal, people you've heard of. Diamond, Sandy Weil, Steve Black, I don't know if you've heard these names. Sandy runs Citigroup, Jamie Dimon runs Chase, Steve Black runs capital markets at Chase. So we're in a room talking to people from the city of New York, and Steve says, look, the city is a very, very important client to us. And the way this works is anything you spend over $100, the federal government will reimburse you. Normally, when we do this with a client, we would charge $102. But the city of New York, you're a very special client to us. So we'll only charge you $101.50. And the city people, I will never forget this to my day, the poor guy that was representing the mayor's office is sitting there like this, and the $101.50 gets said, and all of a sudden his leg starts just kicking. And sure enough, he says, look, last week we did a $1 billion deal with JP Morgan, and it was the exact same circumstances, and they told us about this scheme as well, and they charged us 100.02. And that's a very big difference from 101.50. Now, how do you think my bosses reacted? Anyone want to guess as to what they did? Yeah.
It's a different deal, different structure. We're assuming some of the risk, and therefore, in the end, I mean, they made some spin story.
Oh, so they tried the W thing. All right. I will tell you they did do that, and it didn't work. What's the next thing they did?
Lower the price slightly, and then tried to make them feel better about what they were offering them.
They did that too. It didn't work. Next.
Do I have to give you something that worked, or can I keep on giving you things that didn't?
Well, you just keep going with a bunch of things, you know. You left out one little obvious thing, which was they sent me out of the room to go call JP Morgan and find out whether they were being told the truth.
Were they?
Yes.
Met JP Morgan and then kicked them in the knee when they got home.
Stop writing letters from JP Morgan.
No, actually, we did immediately.
Offer the civil servant a job at so far, that's pretty good stuff.
It wouldn't work. The civil servant's father actually had been a prior chairman of Chase and was a trust fund baby and hated people who made money. So that wouldn't have worked. Right, and gave it away and wasn't living on most of the trust fund, was living, trying very hard to live in New York City with 4 kids on about 50 grand a year.
That's stupid.
Very earnest. People were like that back then, maybe. So the net reaction after lots of yelling and screaming was we did the deal for 100.25. Still more than the 0.02. Not at 101.5. Now, you're me. This is how your department makes its living. And your entire pricing and structuring transaction justification, the W. Karen justification is, we always charge the higher price. We just charge somebody on a big deal a lower price. What does this do to my justifications?
Kills them. Hurts further negotiations if it gets out on the street.
Oh, it was in the newspaper the next day.
You're done.
So, what do you think I ended up telling my bosses? I'm like, look guys, we can't do 102 anymore. I can probably figure out how to justify 100.5. But I can't, because against 100.25, but I can't do 102. So there's no way to justify it. And I'm told, shut up and do your job. Come up with a justification. I see I'm the marketing manager at the W, and they want to preserve that $300 a night room rate. And it doesn't matter that it got publicized in the paper that they let all these airline passengers stay there for 49 bucks. Right? So I'm told to keep doing this. And for the next 2 years, we have arguments about this at very senior levels, about once a week. Now, the other factor I'm going to put into this is I also was running the risk committee at the time. So I was doing risk and compliance. I'm having meetings about that. And I'm being asked to do this justification stuff as well. I was having trouble with this. Yeah?
Isn't there an unwritten rule to collude with the other banks? I mean,
Well, of course we were colluding. How do you think we did those letters?
what I mean is Morgan, stepped out and Andrew, but there's still a ton of banks out there that will
Right.
justify that one too.
Right. Well, actually, the only justification that I could articulate, even though I didn't believe it, was I would tell everybody the Morgan division lost leader. They were trying to steal business. That's what you could tell clients. Doesn't mean I believed it. But my problem is that I have real trouble with how do I write a letter with my name on the bottom that says, I certify that when I do a deal at 102, it's a fair market price, and I did not raise the price just because it was being sold to a government. When I know fully well that if JD or Jeremy wants the same $10 million worth of bonds, the price for them is different, at the same day, at the same time. And the risk to selling to them might be worse, because I guarantee you, I know the government's going to pay me, and I don't know for 2 days whether they are. And actually looking at them, I doubt they would if it was a $10 million bond trade. So, I've got this problem going on. Now, the straw that broke the camel's back for me was I was on vacation in Key West with my wife, and the LAMTA, this is the people in Los Angeles that run the buses and the subways, etc., did a transaction, and their financial advisor was somebody at Lazard Frere. And it turned out that the guy at Lazard Frere was being paid $1 million under the table by Merrill Lynch to steer business to Merrill Lynch. So LA was caught up in this thing, and the FBI went to examine all of the books in LA. And they happened to read all the documents about where Lazard Frere was doing this price markup on the bond.